You really thought I'd drop everything for you? Igor laughed coldly, tossing a wad of cash in Katya's face. Here, take this for your abortion, and disappear. That was the last thing he said before turning his back on her and walking out of her life. Years passed, they met again. He thought he'd laugh once more, but this time the joke would be on him, and he would pay dearly for his betrayal. Hello, dear listeners. Let us know in the comments, where are you tuning in from? And while you do that, settle in, because this next story might just keep you listening until the very end. A crisp September morning crept through the tall windows of the old medical building, casting golden light onto the sleepy faces of students slouched in the lecture hall. The air smelled of chalk, formalin, and something harder to define, a blend of sweat, ambition, and dreams suspended in the air like dust motes. Katya Morozova sat in the third row, diligently taking notes as the professor droned on about protein metabolism. Her eyes stayed fixed on her notebook until he walked in. Igor Lebedev. He appeared in the doorway like an actor arriving late to his own performance. His walk was unhurried, confident. A slight smile played on his lips, as if to say, "Yes, I'm late. So what?" He wore a light designer blazer that stood out against the worn jackets of his classmates like a luxury car parked between rusted buses. His hair was styled to perfection, not a strand out of place. He didn't look like someone running to class. He looked like someone who owned the room. "Sorry I'm late," he said smoothly. There was no apology in his voice. The professor only nodded. Everyone knew who Igor was, the son of banker Lebedev, a name that carried silent power through the corridors of the university. Connections spoke louder than grades. Katya glanced up and, for a split second, their eyes met. She felt her cheeks flush. He smiled, that smile, the kind that made even the smartest girls forget how to breathe. And then he sat down right across from her. The rest of the lecture passed in a haze. Half of Katya's mind followed formulas. The other half kept drifting to his profile. There was something magnetic about him, but also something dangerous. The way he looked at the world, like it owed him something. Like everything and everyone was his to take. The bell rang. Katya began gathering her notes when she heard a voice beside her. "Excuse me, would you happen to know where I can get a real cup of coffee around here?" It was him, Igor, close enough for her to catch the scent of his cologne. "So expensive as a cafeteria downstairs," she said, eyes still on her notebook. "But the coffee's terrible." "I figured," he chuckled. "In that case, maybe you'd join me somewhere better." She looked up at him for the first time. "I'm Katya," she said hesitantly, "but I have anatomy class next." He tilted his head with mock sympathy. "Professor McTiley, trust me, he's going to repeat everything he said last week. He's a classic. Stuck in time." Katya was surprised. How did he know her schedule? She didn't ask. Something curiosity, recklessness, maybe even fate made her nod. They stepped into the warm sun. Yellow leaves swirled through the air like golden confetti. Igor casually offered his arm, as though they'd known each other for years. "Have you heard of Betrayal?" he asked, leading her to a sleek, dark blue car, one that cost more than her mother's entire annual salary. "I've heard of it," Katya admitted, "but it's expensive." "Don't worry about that," Igor said with a grin, opening the door for her. "Today, I'm the host." The car smelled of leather and clean air. Soft music played like a whisper. For a moment, Katya felt like Cinderella, except this time the carriage wasn't turning into a pumpkin. "Are your parents in medicine too?" he asked as they drove. "No," Katya replied quietly, watching the trees blur past. "My mother works at a factory." "What about yours?" Igor smirked. "Let's just say they think medicine is noble." "Me? I'm not sure yet." "Then why study it?" "Because," he shrugged, "education never hurts. And besides, college years are supposed to be the best of your life, aren't they?" At Betrayal, the waiter greeted Igor like royalty. The lights were soft, fresh flowers adorned every table, and the prices on the menu made Katya's throat tighten. "Don't look at the numbers," Igor said gently, noticing her expression. "Just pick what you like." They talked about lectures, professors, the future. He made her laugh with stories from his gilded world, a tale spun with perfect timing. Even the boring parts seemed fascinating when he told them. "Are you always this serious?" he asked as their coffee arrived, in delicate porcelain cups. "Serious?" Katya blinked. Double quotes. "Yes. You always seem to be writing, reading, thinking about something important. When was the last time you just had fun?" She thought for a moment. The movie night with her friends. A walk in the park where she'd studied anatomy under the trees. "It's been a while," she admitted. "Then we need to fix that," Igor said. And the way he smiled made her believe he meant it. Igor's voice was firm, almost defiant. "Life's too short to waste it all on textbooks." By the time they returned to the institute, the sun was already sinking, casting a warm golden hue across the aging stone walls. Igor insisted on walking Katya to the bus stop, despite her polite objections. "I can walk on my own," she had said. But he smiled and gently took her hand. "Goodbye, Katya," he whispered, pressing a light kiss to her fingers. "I hope to see you tomorrow." As the bus rattled through familiar streets, Katya sat silently, her heart still echoing with the memory of his lips against her skin. Everything outside the window seemed brighter, more vivid, as if the world itself had shifted so much so. She didn't even realize she had missed her stop dot at home. Her mother, Anna Sergeyevna, was already setting the table in their cramped kitchen. Her hands, rough from years of factory work, bore no trace of creams or polish, only quiet resilience. "You're glowing today," her mother remarked, eyeing her daughter curiously. "It was just a good day," Katya replied, hesitant to share anything about Igor just yet. Over dinner, her mother talked about factory troubles, delayed wages, and how their neighbor Aunt Valia had asked to borrow money again. Katya listened, but her thoughts drifted. She couldn't help but notice how different the world felt, how some people frequented expensive cafes like it was routine, while others only dreamed of it. "Katya," her mother said later as they washed dishes, "study hard. Education is the one thing no one can take from you." "I know, Mom," Katya murmured, "and don't rush things with boys," Anna Sergeyevna added softly, almost as if sensing something unspoken. "Good men appreciate girls who know how to wait." The next day, Katya spent nearly half an hour choosing what to wear, something she had never done before. Igor appeared at their pathology lecture, this time not late. He walked in like he owned the room, radiating that strange, careless charm. After class, he didn't ask. He simply linked his arm through hers and led her to his car. She hesitated, knowing her histology notes were waiting at home, but followed him anyway. That was how it all began: cafe visits, drives through the city, long winding conversations that felt like they meant everything and yet nothing specific. Igor was generous, sometimes excessively so. Bouquets that cost more than Katya's weekly meals, a delicate bracelet she didn't even dare to wear at home. "Why do you spend so much money on me?" she once asked. He smiled, that enigmatic smile of his. "What else would I spend it on, if not beautiful girls?" She couldn't tell if he was joking or not, and that was part of what made him so dangerous. But slowly, Katya started noticing things she had once overlooked. The way he spoke to waiters, polite but with a subtle condescension, as though addressing a different species. The way he dismissed classmates from modest backgrounds with a practiced, veiled disdain. "You know what I like about you," he said one evening as they dined near the waterfront. "You're real, not like those dolls from my circle who've known the price of everything since birth but never its value." Katya smiled, but his words left a strange sting. "My circle, those dolls." It was as if he was looking down on everyone, splitting the world into categories, some worthy of his ... not. In early November, Igor suggested introducing her to his friends. The gathering was at an elite club. Entry alone cost more than her entire monthly scholarship. His friends were polished, perfect replicas of him, sleek suits, expensive watches, and the air of people who'd never needed to check a price tag. "This is Katya," Igor announced, "our future medical colleague." "How intriguing," purred Alina, eyeing Katya like a curiosity. "Are you from a medical dynasty?" "No," Katya replied quietly. "Of course," Alina said, tone cool and clipped. That one word said everything. The rest of the evening, Katya felt like she was stuck in an exam without knowing the questions. The conversations floated around luxury resorts she'd only seen in magazines, cars she'd glimpsed in ads, and people whose names meant nothing to her. Double quotes, "Eric, you should have seen Kirill's party." One of the men laughed. His dad hired clowns again. One of them was totally drunk. Though everyone laughed, Katya forced a smile, unsure what was funny about someone drinking too much. "And remember last week when Dima decided to try being a normal student?" Another chimed in. "Went to the cafeteria, ate sausage and noodles, nearly threw up. At least now he knows how the other half lives." Igor chuckled. The other half. Those words struck Katya like a blow. Was that what she was? Part of that other half, something to be laughed at behind a cocktail glass. The ride home was quiet. Igor was in a great mood. His friends had approved, though not without reservations. "You were awfully quiet tonight," he said, pulling up in front of a building. "Just tired." She lied. "Don't worry," he said with a smirk. "You'll get used to it." Igor chuckled carelessly. "My friends might seem a bit harsh at first, but they're good guys. Just ... spoiled." Katya nodded politely and stepped out of the car, heading up the creaky staircase of their old Soviet-style apartment building. Half the lights flickered or didn't work at all, and the walls were plastered with graffiti. As she climbed the stairs, a quiet thought took root in her mind. Igor's world and hers weren't just different, they operated by entirely separate rules. But the next day, when Igor greeted her at the university gates with a bouquet of white roses and that same dazzling smile, all her doubts melted away like snowflakes on warm skin. Because love, especially at 19, has a dangerous habit of clouding judgment. "I've got a surprise for you," Igor whispered, kissing her hand. "Tonight we're going to the theater. It's opening night." And just like that, Katya let herself be swept away once again, riding the current of this beautiful life. She didn't notice that the water was slowly getting colder, but on that snowy December evening, while the city turned into a fairy tale under a curtain of falling snowflakes, fate had prepared a cruel lesson for her. After the show, they stopped by a quiet student cafe to warm up with some tea. Katya excused herself to the restroom and was returning to the table when she heard voices, Igor's and his friend Maxim's, drifting from behind a pillar. "So, How's your experiment with the plain girl going? Maxim laughed. Katya froze. What experiment? Igor's voice was sharp, irritated. Oh, come on. We made a bet, remember? You said you'd seduce that what's-her-name ... Katya. In a month, time's almost up. It's not that simple, Igor muttered, his tone unfamiliar, something between frustration and boredom. She's too proper, not like the others. Raise the stakes, Maxim suggested casually. Jewelry, a trip somewhere. We'll see, Igor said vaguely. Katya stood paralyzed behind the column. Her entire world shattered in a single heartbeat. Experiment. Bet. Seduce the plain girl in a month. So that's what it had been. Every sweet word, every rose, every touch, all of it. A game. Her legs gave way beneath her, her chest filled with a searing ache that twisted with every breath. Without saying a word, Katya turned and ran out into the freezing night, tears stinging her cheeks. Only when she was home, sobbing into a pillow, did she allow herself to truly grasp what had happened. She had been nothing more than a toy, a fleeting amusement for a rich boy, the subject of a cruel bet, a disposable experiment, and the worst part, she had almost given him everything. The January air was sharp, every breath like a blade in her lungs. Snow crunched beneath her boots like it, too, resented the cold. Katya stood outside the main university building, wrapped tightly in her worn-out coat, wondering why she had come. 2 weeks had passed since that night. She had avoided Igor ever since, dodging eye contact, sitting far from him in lectures. But then came the note slipped to her by a classmate. Katya, we need to talk. I'll explain everything. Meet me at 7 p.m. by the main entrance. Igor. And now here she was, like a fool. Her mind screamed, run while you still can, Katya. His voice behind her made her turn. Her heart betrayed her. Skipping a beat, Igor walked slowly through the snow, toward her. Even under the dim streetlights, he looked different, disheveled, pale. Shadows beneath his eyes. Was it worry, regret, or just the irritation of a failed plan? Thank you for coming, he said, stopping beside her. I was afraid you wouldn't. I don't even know why I did, she replied flatly. Let's walk, he asked softly. There's a place I want to show you. They walked in silence through the park, where trees stood like ghosts in their white cloaks. The snow muffled their steps, adding to the eerie stillness. Katya walked beside him but kept her distance, on invisible wall separating them. Katya, he began once they reached a half-buried gazebo. What you overheard in the cafe, it wasn't what it sounded like. Oh, and what exactly did it sound like to you? She asked coldly, turning to face him. That I'm playing with you. That you were just some joke to me, he said, his voice faltering. But that's not true. There was a bet though, wasn't there? She interrupted, already knowing the answer. He hesitated, and in that pause was more truth than in any of his words. Maxim said, that I could never pull it off. That girls like you aren't meant for guys like me. That I wasn't capable of real feelings. So you used me to prove him wrong. At first, yes, he confessed. His honesty stung far worse than a lie. But then something changed. I fell for you. For real. You changed me. His words hung in the frozen air like steam, vanishing as quickly as they came. Katya studied his face in the moonlight. Was it vulnerability she saw, or just another performance? He's lying, her mind hissed. But what if he's not? Her heart whispered. How can I ever believe you? She asked quietly. Let me prove it to you, Igor said, reaching out his hand. Just one chance. Katya looked at his hand, torn between the warnings echoing in her head, and the soft ache in her chest. Her mother's voice echoed. Be careful with men like him. But she was 19, and sometimes love or something that feels like it drowns out everything else. In the end, it wasn't reason that won, it was the heart, or maybe a moment of weakness. All right, she whispered. She took his hand, and said softly, but no more games. No more games, Igor promised, pulling her gently toward him. Just you and me. He kissed her under the snowfall, and for a fleeting moment, Katya let herself believe that fairy tales might really exist. The weeks that followed felt like a dream. Igor seemed ... different. Genuinely changed. He became attentive, gentle, less consumed by the mysterious circle of people he once spoke about so often. He took her to the theater, to the ballet, where in the shadowy hush of the grand hall, he whispered explanations into her ear about what was unfolding on stage, and see how the dancer expresses everything without a single word. He said, during intermission you do that too. When you're upset, there's this little crease. He gently touched her lips right here. How do you notice these things? Katya asked, caught off guard. I study you, Igor replied with a soft smile, the kind that made the rest of the world disappear. But the sweetest moments came when they were alone in the quiet of his car, where warmth and silence created a world of their own. In cozy cafes where he'd order her hot chocolate and watch her sip it slowly, as though she feared the sweetness might vanish too soon. Maybe I was wrong, Katya often thought, falling asleep with one of his messages still glowing on her phone screen. Maybe people really can change. Then February came, and with it a slight retreat of the bitter frost. That's when Igor proposed they spend a weekend at his countryside house. It's beautiful this time of year, he said, coaxing her. The quiet of the forest, a crackling fire, just the two of us. no city, no chaos. Katya hesitated. Something inside her whispered that this trip would change everything. Crossing an invisible line she wasn't sure she was ready to step over. Don't rush your answer, Igor said gently, sensing her reluctance. Think about it, I won't pressure you. But he did. Not with words, but with lingering glances, tender touches, and a kind of silence that demanded a response. By early March, when he brought up the trip again, Katya finally agreed. But the cabin in the woods was nothing like she'd imagined. It was a mansion, a secluded estate surrounded by ancient pine trees, the snow around it untouched and glittering in the morning light. The air was so pure it made her head spin. Beautiful, isn't it? Igor whispered, embracing her from behind as she stood on the terrace. Yes, she replied, leaning into him. Inside the house was breathtaking, a roaring fireplace, plush rugs, expensive furniture. And yet, it all felt strangely homely. On the table, fruit was arranged beside a bottle of wine and candles. Someone had clearly prepared for their arrival. How did you manage all this? Katya asked, still taking it all in. We have a housekeeper, Igor said with a casual shrug. She comes when we need her. Those words hit Katya unexpectedly. We have a housekeeper. It reminded her of the vast gap between their worlds. Her mother still hand-washed clothes, while he had people who prepped romantic evenings on command. But the thought dissolved when Igor lit the fire, turned on soft music, and poured the wine in the flickering light. His face looked almost unreal. Handsome.com sincere to us, he said, raising his glass. To us, Katya echoed, sipping the wine. It was sweeter, stronger than she expected. They dined by candlelight, spoke about everything and nothing, laughed at silly jokes. The warmth of the wine spread through her, and the entire evening began to feel surreal, like a scene from a perfect film. Katya, Igor said as they sat by the fire, and something in his voice shifted a tone she hadn't heard before. Love you. The words hung in the air, heavy loaded with meaning. Katya stared into the flames, her heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. I love you too, she whispered because it was the truth. Despite her doubts, despite that uneasy cafe conversation, despite the quiet dread she couldn't explain, she loved him. Igor leaned in, cradled her face in his hands, and kissed her long, slow and deep, as if time had stopped, as if the world no longer existed beyond the glow of that fire. She melted into the kiss, her fears smothered by the warmth of his lips and the strength of his embrace. This is love, she thought, as he gently brushed his fingers through her hair. Real love. Nothing else matters. But late that night, as she lay beside him listening to his steady breathing, a strange emptiness settled deep within her, as though something important had quietly slipped away, and something else, something unfamiliar, had taken its place. I've changed, Katya thought, watching the last flickers of firelight dance across the ceiling. After today, I'm no longer the same. In his sleep, Igor pulled her closer and murmured something she couldn't quite understand. A wave of tenderness washed over her. Maybe she was overthinking, maybe she just needed to surrender to the feeling. The next morning they had breakfast in the sunlit kitchen. Everything felt peaceful, natural. Right. Igor was unusually affectionate, calling her my girl and talking about plans for the upcoming weekend. Then, just as they were packing to leave, he asked, what will your mother say? About what? Katya asked. He smiled slightly. About you spending the night with me. Igor's voice held something unexpected satisfaction, a subtle, almost chilling contentment that made Katya's stomach twist. That's when it hit her. She had lied to her mother. She had told her she was staying over at a friend's house to prepare for an exam. But now, there was no turning back. She'd have to keep lying. How could she possibly explain where she really spent the night? She won't find out, Katya muttered, more to herself than to Igor, but even to her own ears, the words sounded like a quiet betrayal, not just of her mother but of herself. The drive home was cloaked in silence. Igor focused on the road, while Katya stared out the window. Outside the city looked the same streets, same lights, same people, but inside her, everything had changed. When they arrived, Igor leaned over and kissed her goodbye lightly, like always. But something in that kiss was different. Possessive, or was she just imagining it? See you tomorrow at the institute, he said with a casual smile. My girl is home. Her mother greeted her with a curious glance. How was the exam? Anna Sergeyevna asked, eyes searching her daughter's face. Fine, Katya replied, unable to meet her mother's gaze. Katya, her mother's voice softened as Katya turned toward her room. You know, you can tell me anything, right? I know, Mom, she said quietly and shut the door behind her. Lying on her narrow bed in the small room filled with old-school certificates and medical textbooks, Katya stared at the ceiling. Just yesterday, she had been a student with dreams, and now, she was something else. The word slithered into her mind like poison, mistress. It hurt to even think it. No, that wasn't right. They loved each other. Igor talked about the future, made plans, what they had. It meant something, didn't it? Or was she wrong? Was that night at the dacha just a fleeting thrill for a bored rich boy? She closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the warmth of the fireplace, the taste of wine, the tenderness in his touch. But no matter how hard she tried, The feeling in her chest wasn't comfort, it was dread. And then, a week later, came the nausea. At first, she thought it was just stress from exams, maybe something she ate. But when the sick feeling returned, the next morning, icy fear wrapped around her spine. No, she whispered, mentally counting the days. It can't be. We were careful, or were they? That night was a blur. Wine, emotion, kisses that made her forget herself. Had she been careful? Had he? Her hands trembled as she bought a test from the pharmacy. She followed the instructions, her heart thundering with each passing second. The result came fast. Too fast. Two bold lines. Pregnant. The letters burned into her brain, transforming her world into a nightmare. What now? How would she tell Igor, her mother? What about medical school, her future? She sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried softly, hopelessly, the way one cries when they know nothing will ever be the same again. The May rain drummed on the windows of the cafe where it had all begun 8 months ago. Katya sat alone at a corner table, anxiously twisting a napkin in her fingers. Butterflies fluttered in her stomach, not from love, but fear. Today she would tell Igor the truth. For a week, she had practiced her speech, imagining every possible outcome. In some versions, he smiled, embraced her, and promised everything would be okay. In others, he walked away. He loves me, she told herself. He said I changed his life. Outside, the street blurred into watercolor grays as rain poured. Damn people rushed under umbrellas, their reflections smeared across the glass. Katya checked her watch. He was already 30 minutes late. Finally, the door opened. Igor stepped inside, shaking raindrops from his expensive coat. His hair was damp, but it only added to his effortless charm. He spotted her instantly and smiled, that same dazzling smile that once made her heart skip a beat. Hey beautiful, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. Sorry I'm late. Traffic's been insane. It's okay, Katya whispered, breathing in his familiar cologne. He sat across from her, ordered a coffee, then looked at her more closely. You look pale, he said, frowning slightly. Everything all right? She drew in a breath. There was no turning back now. Igor, I need to tell you something, she began, steadying her voice. He leaned back in his chair, sensing the weight of her words. I'm listening. I'm pregnant. The words dropped between them like a thunderclap. In the middle of a quiet storm. Igor froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Katya watched his face shift, shock, confusion. And then something else. Something that made her blood run cold. Pregnant, he repeated, lowering the cup slowly. Are you sure? She nodded. The test showed 2 lines. I checked several times. A heavy silence followed. Igor didn't speak. Didn't even look at her. Katya's heart pounded. Say something, anything. Tell me, we'll be okay. That you love me. That we'll figure this out together. But he just stared past her, as if looking through her. Finally he spoke. How far along? About 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Katya said quietly, her voice trembling as a cold wave spread through her chest. 6 weeks, Igor repeated, as if trying to process the meaning. You mean, since that night at the dacha? She gave a small nod. Yes, he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that once seemed confident, even charming. Now, it looked jittery, uneasy. Katya, he finally said, tension creeping into his tone. You realize this changes everything. What exactly does it change? She asked, though deep down she already knew where this conversation was heading. I'm 22, he began, like a student reciting a memorized speech. I'm only in my 3rd year. I still have 2 years of university left, then residency, and after that, an internship abroad. My father has it all lined up. I have a future, a plan. You understand? She wanted to scream. And what? I wasn't planning to have a life. But she only nodded, swallowing the growing lump in her throat. So what do you suggest? She asked, barely above a whisper. Igor leaned in across the table, lowering his voice as if he were sharing a secret. Look, this isn't the end of the world. It's easy now. Safe. Fast. No consequences. I know a clinic, very professional. You won't feel a thing. Katya stared at his face, so familiar, yet suddenly unrecognizable. This wasn't the man she'd been excited to tell just an hour ago. Where was the Igor who once said he loved her, who promised there'd be no more games? You're serious? She asked, hoping she had misheard. Absolutely. His tone turned cold, clinical, as if he were discussing the specs of a car, not a human life. I'll take care of everything. Best room, private care. In a week, this nightmare will be over. Nightmare, that word hit her harder than any slap. So their child was a nightmare to him. All the whispered I love yous, all the tenderness, just illusions. And what if I don't want to do it? She asked, forcing the words out. Igor looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. Don't want to, he repeated. Katya, you must understand this is impossible for me right now. I can't be tied down with a family. I have plans, a future, and I don't. Her voice cracked. Exactly. So don't ruin it with a reckless decision. You're a smart girl. You should understand that. Smart girl. He was talking to her like a child, someone too naive to grasp the reality of adult life. And in that moment something inside Katya broke. Not her heart, something deeper. Her faith in people, in love, in him. Igor, do you love me? She asked, staring into his eyes. He hesitated. A silence far more telling than any answer. Of course I love you, he said finally, but the words felt mechanical. That's why I don't want you to make a mistake. But Katya already saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't love her. Maybe he never did. She had been a distraction, a toy that had suddenly become too real. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Standing up, don't take too long, he said without looking at her. The sooner the better. She walked out of the cafe into the pouring rain without an umbrella. Cold raindrops mingled with the tears on her cheeks. But the chill in her soul was worse than anything the storm could bring. She wandered aimlessly through familiar streets, haunted by memories. That very morning she'd imagined them picking baby names together, planning a future, meeting his parents. And now, maybe he's right, a dark, unwelcome thought crept in. Maybe it is too soon to be a mother. But then another voice rose from deep inside her. And who decides when it's too soon? The man who just called your baby a nightmare. That night, Katya stood under a steaming shower, as if trying to wash off not just the rain but the shame. Not physical shame, but something worse, the betrayal, the self-disgust for believing his pretty lies, for giving herself to a man who never truly cared. Her mother, Anna Sergeyevna, was in the kitchen when she came out, quietly preparing dinner. One look at her daughter's pale face, and she set the towel aside. What happened, Katya? Nothing. Mom, she whispered, but her voice trembled. Sit, her mother said gently, pointing to a chair. Talk to me. So she did. Not everything, not the pregnancy, not yet. But she spoke of Igor, his reaction, the coldness, the truth behind his empty promises. Her mother listened silently, her lips tightening now and then. When Katya finished, she waited. The silence lingered before her mother approached and wrapped her arms around her. My silly girl, she whispered. I warned you. Not everyone knows how to love. Not for real. What if I never find someone who does? Katya sobbed. You will, her mother said firmly. There are good men out there. They don't drive luxury cars or throw money around. They show love through action, not words. Katya buried her face in her mother's shoulder for a moment. She felt like a little girl, again safe, protected. But she also understood. Her childhood was over. It was time to make a grown-up choice. The next day, Igor called multiple times. She didn't answer. Then came the text. Katya, don't ignore this. We have to resolve the issue. Time is running out. The issue. Evening. A message he couldn't call their child what it was. That evening, Katya met him outside the university. He looked tense, agitated. Have you thought about it? He asked without greeting. She nodded. I've thought, and I've decided. She paused, then calmly, firmly. I'm keeping the baby. Igor turned white, as if she'd slapped him. You're what, Katya? Have you completely lost your mind? He asked again, his voice sharp with disbelief. Do you even understand what this means? I do, she replied calmly. It means, in 7 months you'll have a child. What about your studies, your career, your future? Igor's voice grew louder, attracting glances from students passing by. Katya remained composed. My future now includes a child, she said, but not mine, he shouted, causing several people to stop and stare. Did you really think I'd throw away my life for you? My career, my dreams? His words struck like a whip. Did you really think I'd throw away everything for you? That was exactly what Katya had feared, that she meant nothing to him. I'm not asking anything from you, she said quietly. Nothing. Igor scoffed with cruel sarcasm. What about child support? Legal recognition? Help raising a baby? You think I don't know how this works? I'll manage on my own, Katya answered, her voice suddenly firm, steely in a way it had never been before. On your own, he laughed bitterly. The sound was filled with scorn. On your mother's nurse salary. In your tiny one-bedroom apartment. Katya, wake up. You'll ruin both your life and that child's. That's not your concern, she snapped. Igor stared at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw something new, not irritation, but rage. Cold, sharp, dangerous. You know what, he said, his voice low but every word like a bullet. I pity you, I really do. You're so stupid. I offered you a reasonable solution. I tried to help, but you want to play the noble martyr. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and threw a handful of large bills at her. Here, he said with icy contempt, for baby diapers or whatever girls like you waste money on. Katya looked down at the bills in his outstretched hand, feeling a wave of fury rising inside her. Not sadness, not shame, rage. This was the man she had given her heart to, her innocence, her dreams. And now he was offering her money like she was nothing but. Take your money back, she said, her voice like ice. Don't be stubborn, Igor insisted. You'll need it. I said, take it back. Igor shrugged, then dropped the bills onto the wet asphalt where a light drizzle was falling. The money darkened, soaking up the rain. As you wish, he said, but don't come begging for help later. Don't think you can trap me with this kid. My father has powerful lawyers. He turned on his heel and walked toward his car. Katya stood frozen, watching the wet banknotes scattered across the pavement. Passers-by glanced at her, some with pity, others with judgment. A woman even stopped. Sweetheart, are you going to pick that up? She asked gently. Katya shook her head and walked away, never looking back. Behind her, an engine roared to life. Igor was gone, gone from her life, leaving behind only betrayal, disappointment, and a heartbeat inside her. That night Katya sat on her bed, hugging her knees, the room silent except for her own breathing. In her belly, still small, but alive, grew a new life. His child, the one he called a mistake, the one he tried to pay to forget. But that didn't mean the child was unwanted. "I will love you for both of us," Katya whispered, placing her hand on her stomach. "You will grow up surrounded by love, even if your father never wanted you." The tears eventually dried, but the pain remained alongside something else. Resolved. Igor had done her a favor. He'd shown her his true face before it was too late. Better now than years down the line. Trapped in an illusion, she stood and walked to the mirror in the reflection. She no longer saw a naive girl in love with a charming boy. She saw a woman, mother, and this woman would survive. The next morning, Katya went to the university dean's office. She handed in a request for academic leave, citing family circumstances. It wasn't a lie. The dean, an older woman with kind eyes, read the form in silence. At last she looked up. "Katya, you're one of our best students. Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," Katya said with quiet determination. "Then I wish you all the luck in the world, dear, and remember, our doors will always be open to you." As she walked out of the dean's office, Katya felt lighter, as if a heavy chain had been lifted from her shoulders. The old life was over, a new one was beginning, one filled with challenges. Yes, but also truth. And in that new life, there was no room for lies, broken promises, or men who called children nightmares. She never saw Igor again. Word floated back through classmates he was still studying, still driving his fancy car, still charming new girls. Sometimes Katya wondered, did he ever tell them about her, about the foolish girl who kept the baby? Or had he wiped her from his memory like an inconvenient smudge? It didn't matter anymore. Katya had other priorities now. Dreams of a different kind, dreams that stirred and fluttered beneath her ribs, growing stronger with each passing day. Outside the maternity ward, a February blizzard howled like the world itself was protesting what was about to happen. Inside, Katya gripped the hospital bedsheets until her knuckles turned white. The contractions came in waves, each stronger than the last. Between them, she had just enough time to think how far she'd come after leaving school. She had moved to her aunt's house in a small industrial town where no one knew her story. Her mother's sister, a nurse, had taken her in without questions. There Katya had helped with the housework, read medical textbooks her aunt brought home, and waited. Now the moment had come. The pain was sharp, relentless, but Katya was ready. Just a little more. "Sweetheart," a nurse whispered. Katya nodded, gritting her teeth. She wasn't just giving birth to a child. She was giving birth to a new life for both of them, and nothing would stop her now. "Push, I can see the head." The midwife, an older woman with kind eyes, spoke with calm urgency. Katya gathered what little strength she had left. Her world narrowed to a single moment. Then, with a cry that pierced the silence, life itself burst into the room. A new voice filled the air, powerful, alive. Tears of exhaustion mingled with overwhelming joy as a tiny, warm bundle was gently placed on her chest. Her son. Without hesitation, she whispered his name. "Maxim, what a beautiful boy." The midwife smiled. "Healthy and strong. His father must be proud." "There is no father," Katya said softly, eyes never leaving her son's face. "But he is me, and that's enough." Maxim's tiny fingers wrapped tightly around hers, and in that fragile grasp was something mighty and unconditional, love that made all the pain and fear feel like shadows from another life. Igor had once called him a nightmare, but Maxim, he was the most beautiful miracle Katya had ever known. Aunt Larissa came every day. She brought fresh fruit, stories from the hospital, and quiet strength. On the third day, she sat by Katya's bedside, eyes serious. "Katya," she said gently, "have you thought about what comes next? I know it's early, but time doesn't wait." "I want to return to the institute," Katya replied, rocking Maxim in her arms. "I still want to become a doctor." "With a baby?" Larissa asked, surprised. "That won't be easy. Are there other options?" Katya looked her aunt straight in the eyes. "If you're thinking of an orphanage, don't. I'm not giving him up." "Oh God, no," Larissa gasped. "Of course not. I just mean studies. Work a child. It's a heavy load." "I'll manage," Katya said firmly. "He deserves a future. And to give him one, I need an education." When Maxim turned 1 month old, Katya returned home. Her mother, Anna Sergeyevna, met them at the door with tears in her eyes, and fear blended in her expression. She held her grandson for the first time, gazing at his face for a long moment. "He looks just like you did as a baby," she finally said. "The same eyes, the same stubborn little chin." "That's good," Katya replied quietly. "Means he won't have anything from his father." "Don't say that," her mother whispered. "A child isn't to blame for the actions of their parents." Re-enrolling at the institute was harder than Katya had imagined. The dean reviewed her documents with cool professionalism. "You've missed an entire year," she said. "The curriculum has changed. New subjects, more requirements. You'll have a lot of catching up to do." "I'm ready," Katya replied. "And the child?" the dean asked pointedly. "Lectures, labs, hospital rotations. This takes nearly all your time." "A mother will help," Katya said. though she knew the burden she was placing on Anna Sergeyevna's already weary shoulders. Very well, the dean said, but there will be no special treatment. If you fall behind again, you'll be asked to leave. The first months were brutal. Katya rose at 5 a.m. to feed Maxim, dressed quickly, and raced to lectures. Between classes, she'd slip into the restroom to pump milk into bottles, which she'd pass off to her mother during rushed handoffs. By the time she got home, Maxim was already asleep, and then books until deep into the night. One night, at 4 a.m., her mother found her hunched over an anatomy atlas, eyes bloodshot. "You're not sleeping at all?" her mother asked, horrified. "I have to, Mom," Katya murmured. "I'm behind. And your health. Your son needs a mother, not a walking ghost." "I'll manage," Katya whispered, almost like a prayer. It was slow, agonizing progress, but progressed nonetheless. By the end of her second year, she was no longer the lowest in her class. Some classmates pitied her. Others admired her determination. A few judged her silently. "Did you hear Morozova topped the surgical exam again?" one girl whispered in the locker room. "No surprise," another sneered. "She's obsessed. I still don't get why she even had a baby if she couldn't provide." "Maybe she has someone," a third suggested. "Just hiding it." Katya heard the whispers. She pretended she didn't. What mattered wasn't gossip. What mattered was Maxim, growing, laughing, healthy, and her dream of becoming a doctor inching closer to reality. Her first real patient came in her 4th year. She was on call in the internal medicine department when they brought in a man with a heart attack. Katya assisted the cardiologist, handing tools, tracking vitals. The tension was suffocating, but she didn't flinch. The surgery was a success. When the man opened his eyes, he looked at her with a faint smile. "Thank you, doctor," he whispered. Katya flushed. "It wasn't me. Dr. Mikhail Petrovich performed the operation." "But you helped, girl," the cardiologist said, removing his gloves. "You've got good hands. And more importantly, you feel your patients." Those words warmed her soul. The entire walk home. Maxim, now 3, was waiting. He met her at the door, arms outstretched. "Mama, I missed you," he cried, hugging her tightly. "I missed you too, sunshine," Katya whispered, holding him close. "Tell me about the hospital," he asked, crawling into her lap. Katya told him simple stories, how they helped people, how hearts got fixed, how doctors cared. "I want to be a doctor like you," Maxim announced proudly. "That's wonderful," Katya smiled. "But you can be anything as long as it helps people." Anna Sergeyevna listened from the kitchen, eyes shining. Her grandson was growing into a kind, curious boy, and her daughter, despite every challenge, was blooming into the woman she was always meant to be. "You know, Katya," her mother said softly one night. One evening, as they were washing the dishes together, Katya's mother suddenly said, "I'm proud of you." "For what, Mom?" Katya asked, surprised. "For not breaking, for turning pain into something beautiful." "Maxim isn't pain," Katya replied gently. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "I know," her mother smiled, "but many in your place would have given up." By her 5th and final year of medical school, Katya had chosen to specialize in cardiac surgery. The complexity of the operations, the split-second decisions, the very idea of bringing a heart alive back from the brink of death captivated her completely. Her mentor, Professor Gregory Nikolaevich, was known to be strict but fair. He said, after yet another grueling operation, "You've got talent, but talent is nothing without discipline." "I'm ready to work," Katya said firmly. "I can see that. But do you understand what cardiac surgery really means? Long hours, emergency calls at any time, crushing responsibility." He paused, eyeing her carefully. "You have a child, don't you?" "I do." "And how do you plan to manage both?" "I'll find a way," she replied without hesitation. The professor looked at her for a long moment before finally nodding. "Then, let's give it a try. After graduation, you'll stay for your residency." Her diploma defense was flawless. Katya stood tall, presenting her thesis on congenital heart defects in children. In the front row sat her mother, Anna Sergeyevna, and 5-year-old Maxim, scribbling away in a tiny notebook. "What are you writing?" Katya asked with a smile once the defense was over. "Smart words," Maxim replied seriously. "So I remember how my mum became a doctor. Residency turned out to be even harder than university. 12-hour shifts, overnight duties every other day, constant stress. Maxim grew used to falling asleep without bedtime stories and waking up with his mother already gone. Anna Sergeyevna practically raised him while Katya poured her soul into medicine. But Katya made sure that every moment she did spend with Maxim mattered. One rare weekend morning, as they were making breakfast together, Maxim looked up and asked, "Mom, why don't I have a dad?" Katya froze. It was the question she had feared from the moment he was born. "You have me and Grandma. Isn't that enough?" "It is," Maxim said quickly. "But in kindergarten they say everyone's supposed to have a mom and a dad." "They say a lot of things," Katya replied, kneeling to his eye level. "But you know what really matters, that you're loved, and you are so very much." "I love you too," Maxim said, wrapping his arms around her. "I don't need a dad, I have you." In moments like this, Katya knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Maxim was growing up without a father, but never without love. If anything, the love he received from 2 devoted women more than filled that gap. After finishing her residency, Katya was offered a position at the regional cardiac surgery clinic. The salary was multiple times higher than what her mother earned. At the factory, for the first time in years, they could afford a few small luxuries. Mom, Katya said one evening, let's move to a bigger apartment. Maxim should have his own room. We have enough here. Anna Sergeyevna replied, better save that money for a rainy day. What rainy day? In case you get sick? Or Maxim? Or she didn't finish. But Katya understood. Years of poverty had taught them, always prepare for the worst. Her first independent operation came 6 months into the job. An 18-year-old boy was rushed in with a congenital heart defect. The surgery was complex. The odds 50-50. The boy's parents looked at Katya with such fragile hope she could barely breathe. Doctor, the mother said, trembling. He's our only child. I understand, Katya replied, thinking of Maxim. We'll do everything we can. The operation lasted 6 hours. Every stitch, every incision, demanded absolute precision. And when the boy's heart finally beat strong and steady on its own, Katya felt a joy so deep it brought tears to her eyes, as if she had saved her own son. Well done, said the observing professor. At this rate, you'll be one of the best in the city before long. His words proved prophetic. In the next 5 years, Katya's reputation soared. Patients came from across the region, then from neighboring provinces. By the age of 30, she was head of the cardiac surgery department. At 32, with backing from investors, she opened her own private clinic. Do you remember, Anna Sergeyevna said on opening day, how you cried when that man Maxim's father left you? I do, Katya nodded. Double quotes. Well, look at you now, a clinic with your name on it. The respect of your peers, a brilliant son. Maybe it was for the best, after all. Katya looked at the plaque above the door. Cardiac Surgery Center. Chief Physician, Kamorozova. Next to her stood Maxim, now 13, holding a bouquet for his mom. He was in 7th grade and had already decided he would become a doctor. You know, Mom, Katya said quietly, I think I'm actually grateful to him. To who? Her mother asked Igor if he hadn't shown his true colors back then. I might have married him, had more children, and eventually discovered what kind of man he really was. But instead, he set me free to live my real life. Wise words, her mother said softly. Mama, are you proud of me? Maxim asked, stepping forward. How could I not be? Katya said, embracing him. You're the best son in the world. And you're the best mom, he whispered back. Seriously, the teenage boy said with conviction. And the best doctor in the world, he added. Want to be just like you. You'll be even better, Katya replied, kissing the top of her son's head. Standing at the entrance of her private clinic, Katya took a deep breath, letting the cool October air fill her lungs. Her mind drifted back through time, 16 long years. Once, at just 19, she believed her life was over. But she had been wrong. That was only the beginning. The real life, one filled with meaning, with love, and with victories, had just begun. Igor never knew what he lost the day he walked away from his own son. But Katya did. Maxim had grown into an extraordinary young man, kind, intelligent, driven. He carried the best parts of her and none of Igor's flaws. Or perhaps, if there was something of his father in him, it was only the good, because even the darkest hearts hold a flicker of light. Come, Katya said warmly, linking arms with her son and her mother. Let me give you the full tour of the clinic. Maxim, pay attention to the operating rooms, she added with a smile. You might be working here someday. I will be, the boy answered without hesitation. Right after I graduate, from the same medical institute you did. And what if they don't accept you? Katya teased. They will, Maxim replied calmly. I'm the son of the best doctor in the city. And he was right. In that moment, Katya realized that her greatest achievement wasn't the state-of-the-art clinic, the respect of her colleagues, or financial independence. It was him, the young man standing beside her. She had raised not just a son, but a good person. The future stretched ahead, full of dreams and possibilities, and behind her she left the memory of a naive girl who once believed love was about pretty words and expensive gifts. Now she knew the truth. Real love was work. It was care, responsibility, and quiet strength. And the greatest love of her life was walking beside her, describing how he would heal people when he became a doctor. Can I work with you? Maxim asked with wide-eyed hope. Of course, Katya replied, her voice steady. We'll save lives together. In those few words lived a confidence she had never known 16 years ago. Back then, the future had felt like a black hole. Now, it glowed with promise. And right beside her stood the reason why every hardship had been worth it. Rain tapped softly on the panoramic windows of the cardiology clinic, casting a rhythm that felt almost like a lullaby. Katya sat in her office reviewing test results when her secretary Marina entered with a file in hand. Dr. Anatolievna, she said carefully, we have an emergency admission. Male 38 myocardial infarction. He needs immediate surgery. Katya set the file aside. I'm on my way. Who's the patient? Marina read the name from the chart. Lebedev Igor Vasilovich. Time froze. Katya's breath caught in her chest. That name, she hadn't heard it in 16 years, yet it still struck her like a thunderclap. Not from love that had burned out long ago, but from the raw memory of pain, humiliation, and a handful of cash thrown on rain-soaked pavement. Dr. Anatolyevna Marina asked, noticing her expression. Is something wrong? No, Katya said quickly, regaining her composure. Prepare the OR, I'm coming. Igor, she thought, as the elevator descended. What brought you here and why? To my clinic. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos. Igor lay on a stretcher hooked up to a heart monitor. His skin was pale, damp with sweat. Katya paused in the doorway. Time had changed him. Lines had formed around his eyes. Silver dusted his temples, and that arrogant confidence he once wore like armor was gone. A middle-aged woman, likely his wife, turned to Katya with desperation in her eyes. Doctor, please, tell me he's going to be okay. We'll do everything we can, Katya said in a calm, professional voice. He's being prepped for surgery now. Igor stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a second, he saw only a face, a lifeline. But then recognition struck, and his pupils widened. Katya, he croaked. It's you. I'm your cardiac surgeon, she replied, voice cool and distant. Please remain calm. Stress isn't good for your condition. But how? He tried to speak, but Katya had already turned away. Prep the patient, she instructed the nurse. Standard protocol. In the operating room, Katya pulled on her gloves. Her thoughts swirled as she stared at the man who had once shattered her world, now lying powerless under the sterile lights, his life in her hands. She could walk away. She could find a reason not to help. But that thought flickered for only a moment. Katya was a doctor, and doctors take an oath to save lives, no matter who the patient is. No wonder. Will he recognize Maxim if they cross paths, she thought, as she made the first incision. Her son was likely at school, but he often dropped by the clinic after classes. The surgery lasted 3 hours. Katya focused with unwavering precision. The rest of the world ceased to exist. There was only the failing heart in front of her, and the duty to restore it. When the final stitch was done, and the heart monitor returned to a steady rhythm, she felt that familiar rush of quiet victory. Well done, her assistant said. You saved his life. We saved him, Katya corrected. Transfer him to recovery. In the ICU, Igor was slowly regaining consciousness. Katya stood silently by his bedside, checking the machines. His eyes opened. He stared at her, fragile and uncertain. Katya, he whispered. I need to talk to you. Speak, she said coldly. I'll explain, Katya said without looking up from the chart, her voice calm but distant. Just, not here, not alone. There's no one else in the room, Igor whispered, struggling to lift himself against the pillows. His face was pale, drained, but his eyes burned with a feverish intensity. You became a doctor, he said, in his voice. A cardiac surgeon I did, Katya replied curtly, but with a child, that should have been impossible. Nothing was impossible. I had a goal, she said, her tone sharp and cold. Igor fell silent, letting the words sink in. Then, quietly, the child. What happened to the child? Katya turned her gaze to him, her voice like ice. What child? You know, the child. Oh, you mean the nightmare. Her tone shifted, steel slicing through each syllable. The one you begged me to get rid of. Igor flinched. Hearing his own words echoed back at him was like being slapped. Katya, I was young, I was stupid. You were, she agreed, her voice devoid of emotion. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other patients to attend to. Wait. He reached out, trying to grab her hand, but fell short. Please, just listen. She paused at the door but didn't turn around. I regret it, Igor said, his words rushed and desperate. I regret everything that happened back then, every single day. You have no idea how much I hate myself for it. Oh, I think I do, Katya replied. You feel guilty because you ended up on my operating table. You're embarrassed. No, Igor's voice cracked. I hate myself for what I did to you, for walking away, for losing you, for losing everything. She turned to face him now, her expression unreadable. Losing what, exactly? He swallowed hard. A family, love, a real life. You have a wife, Katya reminded him. I saw her in the emergency room. I do, he said flatly. But it's not what you think. It's a marriage of convenience. My father insisted I marry someone who could help my career. And how's that career going? She asked with dry sarcasm. Igor laughed bitterly, then winced from the pain. Gone. My father was imprisoned for corruption 5 years ago. The bank collapsed. I lost everything. My job, my connections, my future. My wife's just waiting for me to get better so she can file for divorce. Katya didn't speak, but a flicker of justice danced in her eyes. I'm sorry, she finally said without warmth. Katya, please. Igor's voice cracked. Again, can I see him? See who? The child. I just want to know. Do I have a son or a daughter? Katya paused. Her eyes narrowed, her voice even. A son. A son, Igor repeated, almost in awe. What's his name? Maxim. Maxim. He whispered the name as if it was sacred. That's beautiful. How old is he? 16. Igor's breath caught in his throat. He closed his eyes. Does he know about me? He knows he doesn't have a father. That's enough, Katya. Please. Igor. Voice trembled now. Let me see him. Just once. I'm not asking for anything more. She was about to refuse, but just then, the door creaked open. A tall teenager with a backpack stepped into the room. "Hi, Mom," Maxim said cheerfully. "I was at the library prepping for the biology Olympiad." He stopped when he noticed the patient. "Oh, sorry," he said politely. "Didn't know you were in a consultation." Katya stared at her son, then glanced sideways. Igor's eyes were locked on the boy, studying every feature, drinking him in like a man dying of thirst. "Maxim," she said, her voice steady, "this is my patient, Mr. Lebedev." "Nice to meet you, sir," Maxim said, extending his hand with perfect manners. Igor took the boy's hand and held it just a little too long. "Maxim," he repeated softly as if tasting the name. "Do you want to be a doctor like your mom?" "Yes," Maxim grinned, "a heart surgeon. Just like her. She's the best in the city." "I can see that," Igor replied, his eyes misty. "You must be proud of her." "Very," Maxim said without hesitation. "She raised me all by herself, studied, worked, never asked for help. I think she's a hero." The word struck Igor like a blow. Without any help. His face turned ghostly pale. Katya saw the pain ripple across him. "Maxim, go home," she said gently. "Have dinner with Grandma. I'll be back soon." "Okay, Mom." He gave her a quick hug. "Nice meeting you, Mr. Lebedev." When the door clicked shut behind him, Igor covered his face with trembling hands. "He's incredible," he whispered. "Smart, kind, so well-mannered. Everything I never was." "Yes," Katya said softly. "He is." "I agree," Katya said quietly. "He's not you." Igor slowly lowered his hands from his face, and Katya noticed, for the first time, that his eyes were wet. "I know I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness," he said hoarsely. "I know it's too late, but I've thought about you every year. About what I lost." Katya let out a bitter smile. "You thought," she said. I didn't have time. I was raising a son. Studying, working. I had no time left to waste thinking about you." Igor flinched. "Do you hate me?" he asked in a whisper. Katya paused. It was strange. But no, she didn't feel hatred. Perhaps she had once. But the years, the responsibilities, the motherhood, had washed away all intense emotions toward this man. "No," she answered honestly. "I don't hate you. Hate requires feeling something. I feel nothing for you." The words cut deeper than any accusation. Igor suddenly understood. To Katya he had become no one. Not an enemy. Not even a painful memory. Just a void, an empty space. "And if I asked," he said cautiously, "if I asked you to give me a chance?" Katya narrowed her eyes. "A chance for what?" "To meet your son. To suddenly try and become his father, or at least his friend." She looked at him long and hard, at this hollow man, fragile and broken. Then she slowly shook her head. "Maxim has a family," she said calmly. "He has people who love him. He has goals, dreams, a future. He doesn't need complications in the form of a father who shows up out of nowhere." "But he has the right to know," Igor interrupted. "Know what?" Katya snapped. "That his father abandoned his pregnant mother. That he threw money at her to make the baby disappear. That he called him a nightmare. You think that will improve his life?" Igor said nothing. There was nothing to say. Every word she spoke was the truth he had spent years avoiding. "Katya," continued, her voice firm, "Maxim grew up without a father, but he never lacked love. He's strong, confident, kind, because he didn't know you." There was silence. "So never?" Igor asked faintly. "Never," Katya replied firmly. "When he turns 18, I'll tell him the truth. If he chooses to find you, that'll be his decision. But he may not need a father who arrived 16 years too late." Igor nodded slowly, silently accepting the verdict. "And you?" he asked softly. "Are you happy?" Katya thought for a moment about her life, about the work she loved, the son she was proud of, her mother who had always been her rock, the patients she had helped, the colleagues who respected her. She met his eyes. "Yes," she said with quiet conviction. "I'm happy even without a husband." He asked. "I have a family," she corrected him. "My son, my mother, that's all we need." "And love?" he asked one last time. She smiled. "I have love too, for my son, for my work, for life itself. It's not the kind of love I knew at 19, but it's deeper, stronger, real." Igor knew then the conversation was over. Katya turned toward the door, but just before leaving she paused. Without looking back she said, "By the way, yes." Igor asked, "Thank you." He blinked, confused. "For what?" "For showing me your true face 16 years ago. If you hadn't, I wouldn't have become the woman I am today." The door clicked shut, leaving Igor alone with the bitter weight of everything he had lost. Katya walked down the hallway of her clinic where new lives were waiting to be saved, where she belonged. At home, Maxim greeted her with questions about the school Olympiad and plans for the weekend. Anna Sergeyevna was already setting the table, as she did every evening. "How was your day, Katya?" her mother asked. Katya smiled, sitting down. "An interesting case," she said simply. "A patient from the past." "From the past?" her mother asked curiously. "Igor," Katya said, keeping her voice even. Anna Sergeyevna nearly dropped her spoon. "That Igor, the very same." And Katya shrugged. "I operated. He'll recover and leave." Maxim didn't understand who they were talking about, but he sensed the importance of the moment. May asked, "Can I come to the clinic again after school tomorrow? I want to watch how you do surgeries." Katya smiled. Of course, but only from the observation room for now. Okay, he nodded. At least I'll get to see you saving people. Katya looked at her son, her heart full. Yes, she thought, I save lives, and the most important one I ever saved was my own. What do you think? If Katya had chosen a different path, would she have ever found happiness? Or was this the only road that could lead her there? Let us know in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories that matter.